Hi, I'm Alan, and I'm going to teach you about Marvel Comics' foreign-born supervillain.
My name is Drew, and I'm going to tell you how the U.S. helped Japan rebuild after World War II.
Hi, I'm Darren, and in Soviet Russia, the bridge builds you.
What does this all have to do with Diplomat? Find out in this episode of History Bluffs! Hello and welcome to another episode of History Bluffs. It's where truth is stranger than fiction. My name is Adam, your announcer, and here is your host. It's Chris.
Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of History Bluffs. Thank you very much. Thank you for the applause. Thank you for joining us. And as Adam mentioned, my name is Chris. I'm your host, and we have three outstanding armchair historians over here on the side.
Look at them.
For Alan, Drew, and Darren. Welcome, gentlemen, to the show. The way that this show works, if you are familiar or not familiar with us, I'm going to tell you anyway, either way.
The show is performed completely from a billing office.
That is correct. And yes, indeed. And what we are doing is we have tonight's topic is Adam. And give it up, by the way, for Adam.
What?
Our tech extraordinaire.
You mustn't. Thank you.
So, as Adam mentioned, tonight's topic is Diplomat. And Diplomat is the inspiration for our three historians to come up with stories. And they are going to regale us with the research that they have done, the story that they have concocted to tell us stories inspired by the word diplomacy. Mm-hmm. And the twist on this is that two of the three of them are telling true stories, and one of them is bluffing.
What?
Yes, hence the history of bluffing. So our job, the audience and myself, is to try to determine which of these three historians is tonight's bluff, because even I don't know. Only Adam knows. So, with that, Adam, let's meet our three historians, shall we? First, I'm going to
let's do it. Here they are.
Bring up the full square here. Thank you so much, Adam. I'm going to start with Alan. Alan, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing quite well. What's up?
Good to see you back. Thank you for coming back to the show. And one of the things that I thought of when I heard Diplomat was the Dodge Diplomat. It was a car in the late 70s, early 80s.
What?
Yes, the Dodge Diplomat. It's a square car, as 83% of cars were back then. Alan, what's a car that you remember from your childhood?
From my childhood, the first car my parents had that I recall was a Saab.
A Saab?
Wow. Yes. It was a red Saab.
Yes, the Saab. One of the things I remember about Saab was that one of the jokes was you'd often see Saab owners sobbing on the side of the road waiting for a tow truck.
Do they even make Saabs anymore?
Yes, they do.
Okay, I just haven't seen
Saab
it.
is a fine vehicle. It was just something that was said back in the day.
You're acting like they're our sponsors.
Yeah, no, but just in case for future sponsorship, I just wanted to apologize on behalf of myself and the crew. But our next historian is Drew. Welcome back, Drew McCallum from Chicago. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good, Chris. Good to be here.
Good to be back. All right. So, when I thought of Diplomat and think of the Dodge Diplomat, and when I heard the word Dodge, I was thinking like dodgeball. Also from my childhood, as we all played dodgeball. Most of us, I'm sure. What's a game that you remember from your childhood?
Oh wow. I have horror stories about dodgeball because I was a good target, but not a good thrower of the dodgeball. But I remember playing Marco Polo a lot, and like we had a pool, above ground pool at my house, and Marco Polo was a fun game we'd always play.
All right, Marco Polo, and some would say, and myself included, that even though you weren't able to dodge the ball in dodgeball, it was still an integral piece of the action. You were an important part of the game because without the targets like yourself, who was the people throwing the ball have to throw to at
no game
round.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah,
Can't play the game without that.
Yeah, couldn't play the game without it.
No.
Right,
No.
that's right. And our third historian is Darren. Hello, Darren. How are you, my friend?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. So the last thing was, Dodge reminded me of there was a guy in our high school named Vinny Dodge, and when I thought of Vinny, I thought of the TV show Welcome Back, Kotter. And what's a show that you recall from your from growing up?
From growing up, the first thing that comes to mind for whatever reason is Speed Racer.
Speed Race.
Oh.
Speed Racer, yeah, because it was only on at very odd specific times. It was like syndicated.
That's right.
And so it was like a treat to be able to watch it because it would just show up like
Yeah, right.
and the car had like those saw blades.
The buzz saws.
Yeah.
So realistic.
Yes, indeed. Well, the reason I went down that little path with all three of them on those was because that's how this game works. The show works. The topic is inspired by what we think of from that word, and then we go down those paths and tell stories based on that. So, yes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hear each of our historians, Alan, Drew, and Darren, each have a story inspired by diplomacy. 3 rounds of stories, Adam, is what we're going to hear. So let's put up the card and show them the rules of the game, shall we?
Oh, let's do it. The official rules card, because it's a game show. Let's check out the rules, just to hammer those in for those who weren't paying attention.
Indeed. So the historians are inspired by the topic. Tonight's topic is diplomacy. True stories. The two of our 3 historians are telling true stories. Those are factual stories. The one historian who is bluffing, they are making up their story. That's right. The premise of their story is going to be false. Some of the details, some places, some people may be actual true places, true people, but the premise of their story is fictional. And the one thing we ask from the audience is that you do not debunk anything during the show. Yes. And we will have an opportunity to do that at the end of the show, where we go through for 3 rounds. Each of these historians will tell us stories, each round getting successively shorter in time. Start out with 75 seconds, then we go to 60 seconds, then we go to 45 seconds in the third and final round when they wrap up their story. And once they wrap up their story, when we wrap up that round, we will then have an opportunity to determine who we think is tonight's bluff. And at that point, that is when we ask the audience if you want to share some things you know about some of the stories or details that they mentioned in the stories are either true or false. Then please go ahead and feel free to add those at that point. But right now, we're asking people, please do not debunk the stories in the first or second round to give the show some breath. So with that, Adam, let us jump right into it, shall we?
Let's do it. Let's start out by going to round number 1.
All right.
This is the beginning of the round, and you know how we know we are at round 1, Chris?
Let's see it.
We've got the round tracker 9,128.
We do indeed. Round tracker 9128 is above my head on
9128.
screen. For those of you listening to the podcast, it is 3 segmented bars that have 3 circles inside each of them, and each of those 3 circles represents 1 round of storytelling for our historians. So I'm going to hand it off right away to Alan. Alan, you're going to come out and have the big screen. You have 75 seconds for your opening round, and the floor is yours.
All right. The dawn of Stan Lee's foundation for the Marvel Universe began in 1961 with the publishing of Fantastic Four #1. Shortly thereafter, in Fantastic Four #5, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby introduced the superhero team to their most formidable rival, Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom is known to have a mastery of science and technology, wearing an advanced power armor and having comparable intellect to Mr. Fantastic, aka Reed Richards, leader of the Fantastic Four. And many of you may be aware of the recent announcement that Robert Downey Jr. has been cast to play Dr. Doom. The justification is not yet known as far as the story is concerned, but it is an intriguing reveal nonetheless. Now, Quoting Stan Lee, he said, "As a citizen, you can cross the street illegally and be written up for a citation. But if you approached a police officer and said, 'I want to take over the world,' there's nothing they can do. So technically, Dr. Doom isn't a criminal." And what does this have to do with diplomacy? I'll get to that in the next round.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to start with Drew. Drew, what do you think of Alan's opening round?
First of all, the Stanley impression was top notch. Although
I agree.
A little tweaking, maybe a little Scottish flair, and I heard a little Sean Connery in there.
There was some slur. Definitely slur in there.
But that's what I thought at first. And then, okay, so this all checks out, and I don't keep up with the comics as much as I know Alan does, but I did hear about Robert Downey Jr. being cast, and I'm curious to see how that's gonna. I'm kind of skeptical myself, but nonetheless, I'll see how it plays out. My only big takeaway here is that Doctor Doom didn't appear until issue number 5, which makes me wonder who did they fight in episodes 1, 2, 3, and 4. Who was the big villain there?
I mean, I could tell you. I don't know if you want to know for sure.
I'm sure he knows. I'm sure he has them. He probably has a mint condition.
I wish.
But Doctor Doom number 5, that'd be worth a lot of money if you had that one, Alan.
No doubt.
But it all checks out so far.
Cool.
All right.
All right.
Some skepticism, but it all checks out so far. What about you, Darren? What do you think of Alan's story?
I did not realize until now that Stan Lee sounds so much like Gilbert Gottfried smoking weed. That's my biggest takeaway.
Dr.
But also,
Doom's not technically a criminal.
see what I'm saying? But the only diplomacy connection I've heard so far is that he's being very diplomatic in describing the interaction between the cop and Dr. Doom.
That is true.
Yes. All right.
Okay.
Well, there we have it so far. So good on Alan's story. We're going to move to Drew. Drew, we're going to bring you over here to the center square, and you have 75 seconds for your opening round. The floor is yours.
All right. Following the defeat of Japan in World War II, the United States and its allies remained in Japan to begin the process of helping them rebuild. The occupation and reconstruction of Japan lasted from 1945 to 1952 and was divided into 3 phases. Phase 1, the immediate efforts to disarm Japan. Phase 2, the work to help rebuild and revive their economy. And Phase 3, conclude with a formal peace treaty and alliance. The man chosen to lead these efforts was General Douglas MacArthur, probably heard of him. He took charge of the Supreme Command of Allied Powers, aka SCAP. They had their work cut out for them because food shortages and homelessness was a big challenge. To help establish a new Japanese government that included downgrading the emperor's status to that of a figurehead without political control. They committed to doing all of this while at the same time convincing them that the U.S. could be their friends. By 1949, Phase 2 was underway, and MacArthur was looking to move to Phase 3 in an act of diplomacy. And to bring people together, he turned to the American pastime of baseball. And I'll tell you how he did that in round number 2.
Okay. All right. So MacArthur turned to baseball for diplomacy. Darren, what did you think of Drew's opening story?
Suspiciously missing, because I recently saw the documentary, is the non-inclusion of Godzilla from the movie Godzilla -1.
Oh yeah, that's supposed
Clearly
to be there.
involved in post-Japanese reconstruction, and you would think that would have made your story. I'm just
Okay.
saying.
All right.
All right.
Some, Alan, what did you think of Drew's story?
I mean, it makes sense with my knowledge of post-World War II Japan that all of this would have happened. And I recall a movie called Gung Ho where the Japanese knew how to play baseball in it. So that makes sense too. So we'll see.
Okay. All right. So
Yeah.
So we have some opening round, little skepticism here and there, but mostly good foundations for stories. Let's see if that continues with our third historian. Darren, you're going to come out and have the center square, and the floor is yours.
The year is 1975, and the setting of my story is a small mining town in West Virginia called Vulcan. Now, if you haven't heard of Vulcan, and no, it's not named after the planet from Star Trek, honestly, I'm not surprised. I was curious to learn more about Vulcan, so I hit up TripAdvisor to find out what the top things to do in Vulcan are, and they had 0 results. There's nothing to do in Vulcan. There's not even a hotel. The nearest hotel is 20 miles away. But what Vulcan did have in 1975 is a coal mine and a railway line and an old wooden swing bridge built by the mining company. To get to Vulcan, you parked your car, walked across this swing bridge, across the river, at least until July of that year when the bridge collapsed and fell into the river. So suddenly Vulcan was cut off from the outside world. And Mayor John Robinette, who had been asking for a proper bridge for years, petitioned the county, the state, and even the federal government, but his pleas all fell on deaf ears. So Robinette took the next logical step. If America wouldn't fix his bridge, maybe somebody else would. So he wrote a letter to Leonid Brezhnev, the premier of the Soviet Union, asking for them to build a new bridge.
Okay. Reach out and touch someone, even if they're in no country. And Alan, let's hear your thoughts on Darren's story.
All right, here's where I'm suspicious, because I'm pretty sure that somewhere near Drew, there's a place called Metropolis, Illinois, and they make it all about Superman there. So how do you have nothing to do in a place called Vulcan when the tourism sells itself there? Like, what are you thinking?
Yeah, right.
Missed opportunity or missed marketing opportunity, I guess, or
Right?
activation.
Come see Spock's house in Vulcan, West Virginia.
That's right.
Exactly.
From the famed marketing geniuses that coal miners are known to be.
Yeah. Drew, what about you? What do you think, Drew?
Vulcan's a unique name. Nothing to do with Star Trek, you say. Interesting. The only way to get there was this one swing bridge, and it was like a pedestrian only, or what?
Yeah, there was no road to Vulcan.
Okay, so yeah,
Sounds like
so
an awesome
July,
book cover.
So in July, the swing bridge collapsed in July of 1975. Seems like they should have renamed the town Volcant at that point.
Oh, you
Okay.
sly fox.
And Adam has put back up the round tracker 9128 above my head, and
Sure
it
have.
indeed is full for round number 1 because we have heard all 3 stories. So we have Stan Lee and Dr. Doom from Alan. We have Japan and the Rebuild from Drew, and we have Vulcan, West Virginia from Darren. So we are going to hear more about each of those stories right now as we go to round number 2.
Here we are, Chris. We're in round number 2.
We are indeed back in round number 2. So we are going to move forward. This time, we're going to keep the same order of historians, but we're going to reduce the amount of time for each round. So they had 75 seconds in round number 1. For this round 2, they each only have 60 seconds to tell us the middle portion of those stories.
Wow, that's getting tight. Getting tight.
Ringing out time. So, Alan, we're going to come back to you and have you pick up where you left off on Stan Lee and Dr. Doom.
All right.
Here we go.
So Dr. Doom was born and raised in the Marvel nation of Latveria. Motivated by vengeance against the leadership of the country and a series of fraudulent sales, he amassed a small fortune, which allowed him to eventually overthrow Latveria's Baron and declaring himself ruler of Latveria. As the leader of a nation, Dr. Doom has a Latverian embassy in New York City. And when Dr. Doom is in the United States, he enjoys diplomatic immunity. Yes. Despite being Marvel's #1 baddie, Dr. Doom cannot be arrested by U.S. authorities. And that is one of the more intriguing aspects of Doctor Doom versus other comic book supervillains, is that he enjoys such a luxury as a character. And we're going to learn a little bit more about Doctor Doom right after this.
Okay. The old diplomatic immunity card, pulling that out. All right. What do you think, Drew? What do you think?
There's nothing more American than amassing your fortune through fraudulent sales. So I can see why he would set up shop in New York City, because that's where you have Wall Street and be able to set up shop there. So I don't know. Now this is getting into like the back part of Doctor Doom's history about LaGuardia and whatever that was, and so that's something I'm not familiar with. So that could be made up.
Did you say LaGuardia?
That's what I thought.
What was it?
Latveria.
You can get in and out of New York that way. That's a way.
Latveria. It's like Latvia, just with extra syllables.
But yeah, so there's some parts in here that could be made up.
All right. Some possible parts made up. Darren, what do you think?
Okay.
It sounded at the beginning like he was describing Jeff Bezos, like he made his fortune through fraudulent sales.
Oh, zing.
But then he started talking about Latveria, and I thought, this is 1962. Like, Americans didn't know what Latvia was. It seems like extra work Stan Lee needed to go through to make up a country. He could have said he was from Latvia, and people would not have known what that was.
That's true. No, that's a good point.
Possibly doing more work than he needed to. All right, that's definitely not American. And some people might say. We're going to move to Drew. Drew, you're going to come out here, and you have now 60 seconds to pick up on the Japan rebuild.
Okay, so MacArthur, he knew that baseball was just as popular in Japan as it was in America. He himself had played baseball at West Point with Hall of Fame pitcher Dizzy Dean. Now, Dizzy retired from baseball in 1941, never saw action. But by 1949, he was managing a minor league team, the San Diego Sea Lions. So he recruited Dizzy to bring his team to Japan for a diplomatic series of exhibition games. Now, not only did minor league team travel over, but there were several major league players who had served in World War II joined as well. Some of the big names were Gil Hodges, Warren Spahn, and Yogi Berra. Over the course of a month, the team traveled through Japan, conducting clinics, gifting equipment, and playing exhibition games against both American military and Japanese teams. They had a team. Japan had a team before that, and this was instrumental in helping to relaunch that. All of these were upstaged by a celebrity that joined them later, and I'll tell you who that is in round 3.
Okay, we're jumping in round 3. Darren, what do you think of Dizzy Dean, Gil Hodges, Warren Spahn, and Yogi Berra going to Japan to play baseball?
I saw this movie. Didn't it star Tom Selleck? Anybody? Nobody?
No,
Mr. Baseball?
Mr. Baseball?
Yeah, Mr. Baseball. That sounds like the plot of that movie.
Wow.
Right.
Oh.
The plot thickens. Alan, what do you think of Drew's story?
Well, it's 2 rounds and 2 movie references already. So I was actually starting to doubt Drew at this point because I didn't know any of this stuff. So I was like, maybe he watched Gung Ho and was like, I'm going to make up a story about diplomacy. And that'll be my bluff. But apparently Darren seems to think there's some validity in this story. So I don't know.
Oh, I didn't say it was valid. I just saw a movie.
I saw a movie too.
I thought it was fictional.
Oh.
Reminiscent does not even
Oh, boy.
All right. Well, we have 2 of our 3 dots filled for round number 2. So we are going to bring Darren out. Darren, come out to the center square and take us through what's next in Vulcan, West Virginia, round 2, 60 seconds.
It did not take long before newspapers from coast to coast were talking about the town of Vulcan. For example, the Spokane Daily Chronicle wrote, Soviet officials were amused today by reports that the small town of Vulcan, West Virginia has appealed to the Kremlin for foreign aid. The town, with a population of 200, asked the Soviet government for financial help to build a bridge after the town was turned down by the U.S. and West Virginia governments. Stories also came out about the school children who would cross the river using the railway bridge, crawling underneath parked railway cars, which usually were on the bridge. And reportedly, one child even lost a leg on the way to school. Many anti-communist types were also appalled at the idea. Remember, this was the height of the Cold War, and they were appalled at the idea of communists interfering in an American town. Radio stations and local newspapers received a flood of bomb threats, threatening to blow up any bridge that was built with, quote, red foreign aid.
All right. So, not in my backyard took a whole new meaning for the entire area during this time. What do you think, Alan, of Darren's story?
Well, he's right. This is the height of the Cold War. The initial story here happened in 1975. That's a year before I was born. But even so, I remember in my earliest memories just how heated that Cold War really was back then. And the idea of someone like Gorbachev coming to West Virginia going, yeah, sure, I'll rebuild your bridge. That just was not happening. I can't imagine how this would even be a possibility.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
How indeed a possibility. Drew, what do you think?
To just piggyback off of that, like that raises an interesting question. What's in it for them? Like what does Vulcan have that the Russians need? Was it coal? Was it, what was it, So
Maybe you'll find out in round three.
I feel like we will. I hope we do.
It was long life and prosperity.
Right? So
Okay.
That's
I'm
my
All right.
guess.
Well, we have 2 rounds complete. You see
Whoa.
that on round tracker 9128? Yes,
There they are.
there they are indeed. So, Adam, please take
Yes.
us to round number 3.
Let's do it. Hey, that's a round.
That is a round.
That's
So
a round. We're in the
back
final round.
And we have reduced the time once again to 45 seconds for each story in this round.
Yikes.
So, yes, yikes indeed. With the diplomatic immunity that Dr. Doom is enjoying in New York City, let's find out what happens next. Alan, the floor is yours. 45 seconds to wrap up your story.
Dr. Doom's main backdoor of escape, and also the device used for retconning events out of existence, is having advanced robots take his place in many stories. So, for example, aha, Doom, we caught you. Looks like you aren't so clever after all. And then, sproing, the faceplate pops off, and it was a robot the whole time. So, yeah, if you're like Drew and you're one of these people who are offended or mocking the choice of having Robert Downey Jr. being the next Doctor Doom, just remember that any writer can undo this casting choice with an easy stroke of the pen. And yes, he may be Doctor Doom for now, but he might not be Doctor Doom in the near future.
Well, so the pen can be mightier than the sword sometimes. All right, Darren. Well, actually, Drew. Let's see what Drew. What do you think, Drew, of the Alan's story?
Well, he definitely confused the heck out of me there at the end, because all I heard was advanced robots, which made me think of, what else was an advanced robot? Iron Man, because sometimes he had suits flying around that he wasn't physically in. And so maybe, and what else was in New York City was Stark Industries headquarters or whatever. And so, yeah, if they're going to try to connect this Doctor Doom to Stark, then maybe I should be writing the next Avengers movie.
Whoa.
All right, and Darren, what do you think, Darren, of Alan's conclusion?
Well, I don't want to get too political here, but I just feel like, November 6th, there's going to be a sproing and like Trump or Vance or something. He was a robot all along.
that would raise the drama. I'm all for it. Also, major points to the onomatopoeia sproing.
Sproing.
Thank you.
That's fantastic.
I'm also sporting some actual Doctor Doom wear right now.
What?
Whoa.
Oh man, that's great. Look at you go, man.
Just up the street. That is an Islands of Adventure shirt right there.
Wow.
So, yeah,
Okay.
Classy. He's dressing the part.
that's right.
What's everybody else wearing? I don't see any stories represented in your clothes.
Yeah.
Blue and white shirt.
I don't see a Star Trek shirt on Vulcan or anything. But listen, if Carlos was here, Carlos, one of our regular cast members, he would use that Alan's shirt as fodder to say, well, clearly he's just looked at the shirt that he was wearing and is making this all up. We'll find
That's
out what
true.
the other guys think at the end of this round. But right now we have 2 more of the dots to fill. So that means we're going to bring Drew out. And Drew, come on out. You have 45 seconds to conclude your story. Pick us up back with the baseball going on in Japan.
Okay. So all of these baseball players were upstaged by Lassie. Yes, the dog Lassie. Now, in case you don't know, Lassie was a stage name. In fact, in 1949, Lassie was a male dog named Sport, but to the public, he was Lassie. By 1949, Lassie was already the star of 6 films and a radio show, and it turns out huge in Japan because there was not that much dialogue that they needed to worry about. So some Hollywood exec decided it would be good PR to send Lassie over to Japan on her own diplomatic mission, and saw the baseball tour as a great opportunity to kind of join forces. Lassie joined the team and became their official mascot. And soon it was people were lined up to see Lassie more than they were the baseball games, and that's the story of how baseball and Lassie helped rebuild Japan.
Okay.
Unbelievable. That's amazing.
Darren, what do you think? What do you think of Drew's story there? Yeah.
I'm thinking hopefully Lassie had some diplomatic immunity too for when he went out and pooped on the baseball field.
Oh, that's not good.
Okay. Alan,
Sorry, I never get to use that sound.
That's fair.
You're welcome.
Use it while you can.
I appreciate it. The opportunity was there.
We all made mental notes to try to not give you the opportunity again. Alan, what do you think of Drew's story?
I just think it's fascinating that there was ever a time when Japanese culture was so infatuated with American culture. Meanwhile, so many American of many ages and generations are fascinated with Japanese culture. So I think it's a fun thing to think about. I don't know if both Lassie and baseball were as prominent in this rebuild of Japan as Drew's making it out to be, but I do know of other examples that were definitely influenced, but both by and from Japan. G.I. Joe and Transformers are just an example that I know happen to have a lot of Japanese DNA in them.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's maybe that's for a different episode.
No.
All right. Future minds. Let's see. Darren, we
Chris.
do not have your third story yet.
Oh.
We do not.
So let us put Darren in the main square. Darren, come on out, and you have 45 seconds to wrap up your story.
All right.
And the floor is yours.
So the Soviets assigned a reporter named Iona Andronov from Moscow to contact Mayor Robinette and investigate. And Andronov spoke to him over the phone, and he learned about the town's struggles. And Andronov reported his findings back to his superiors, who were excited. They jumped on this opportunity as an opportunity to embarrass the United States. And so they sent Andronov to the U.S., and he arrived in Vulcan on December 17th, 1977. And he promised them that if the state did not fund them a new bridge, that the Soviets would. Within an hour of his visit, the state of West Virginia announced it would fund the construction of a new bridge, allocating $1.3 million. And the bridge was completed in 1980, and Mayor Robinette was on hand to christen the bridge with 2 bottles of Russian vodka.
Wow. Oh. Unbelievable. Holy cow.
Okay. Alan, what did you think of Darren's conclusion?
So it was basically, it was almost like a bluff of sorts. It's like the Russians are about to fund it, and then they're like, never mind, we'll pay for it. And he was like, the dignitary was like not apparently upset, and they were like, we're gonna use this vodka in your commencement. Yay! I'm helping. I just think it's interesting because at that point, since the dignitary is not there for anything official, he could have just legally defected right then and there. Like, I'm one of you now. I'll be American. Yes.
I live in your town of 200 people.
I am coal miner.
Drew, what about you? What do you think, Drew?
It just seems thing I latched onto was how Russia did this just to embarrass the United States, and boy, it's a good thing that they don't use that tactic anymore, right?
That's they do.
Yeah, exactly.
Boy, that's all I got.
Okay. Well, we have
fair.
heard all three stories. We have heard comments from each of our historians about the other historians' stories. It is now time to determine who we each think is tonight's bluff.
Well, the round tracker's full.
The round tracker is full indeed. So we are now going to come around the horn, and we're going to make our final accusations for who we believe is bluffing tonight from our three historians. So we're going to find out if our historians think it is, Alan with his story of Dr. Doom. We think if they think it's Drew with the story of Lassie upstaging American baseball players in Japan's rebuild, or if it is Darren with his story of backdoor diplomacy and Russia looking to embarrass the U.S. After a small town mayor reached out in West Virginia. So, Alan, I'm going to start with you. Let us know your thoughts. Who do you think is the bluff?
Well, it's funny because I know more about Japan's rebuild than I do about the town of Vulcan, West Virginia. Now, sometimes you could argue, well, that's history bluffs for you, right? It's always what you least suspect. But I'm not going to go that route this time. I'm going to just play and accuse Darren of I don't even know if there really is a Vulcan, West Virginia, so I'm going to say Darren's the bluff.
All right, we have one accusation for Darren. Drew, we're going to you. What do you think?
I think kind of the opposite of that. I think that this story of Vulcan, that very well sounds like something that Russia would do, and it just happens to be a unique name, so I feel like this has some truth behind it. And on the counterpoint, Alan here knows. We all clearly know he knows his Marvel Stan Lee history. That I feel like he knows it so well that he could just easily just flow off a bunch of BS and make it sound so truthful that it's too good to be true.
He's got the shirt. He's got the shirt.
He's wearing his shirt.
Got a shirt doesn't make him what's he?
Yeah, there it is. Beautiful.
And like his Sean Connery, Gilbert Godfrey impression, like that was a decoy. So
Excelsior.
Alan is bluffing.
All right, we have an accusation for Alan. So that brings us to one accusation for Darren, one accusation for Alan. Darren, we turn to you. What are your thoughts? Who's the bluff?
So, coincidentally, I watched another movie about Japan and baseball called The Catcher is a Spy, which stars Paul Rudd, who is also in Marvel movies. And so that's really not helpful to me for coming to a conclusion. But there is some truth to that. Japan actually was really big into baseball in the 1940s because Paul Rudd played a professional baseball player who went to Japan on a goodwill tour before the war, along with other prominent baseball players like Babe Ruth. So that part tracks for me. On the other hand, I have no idea about whether or not Dr. Doom has diplomatic immunity, so I'm going to say that Alan is bluffing.
All right, that's two for Alan. So we have one accusation for Darren, two accusations for Alan, and no accusations for Drew. So, Adam, I'm going to hand things off to you and tell us. So we could possibly have someone pulling the wool over all of our eyes, and that is right. If Drew turns out to be the bluff, he wins the show.
That's true.
Yep.
You're the one that knows. I'm going to hand things off to you, Adam. Please take it away.
All right, I'll take it from here. Please step off of our virtual stage as I line up the potential bluffers. Two are telling the truth, one is telling a bluff. Was your bluff Alan? Was your bluff Drew? Or was it Darren? I will reveal the bluff. This whole time, why, it was Drew!
Ah!
And he got away scot-free. Not a single accusation, meaning Drew has won this episode of History Bluffs. Congratulations.
Well played, Drew.
Well played, Drew. All
Excellent
right.
work.
So, wow. All right. We have not had a scot-free bluff in a couple of weeks.
We have. Let's dig in. What was the deal?
What was the bluff?
What was the bluff? So no, Lassie, to my knowledge, never went to Japan.
Yeah, fair.
There was some baseball. There was some truth behind the baseball thing, but it wasn't any Hall of Fame people. So like I threw in like Dizzy Dean and Yogi Berra. There was like a former major league player who was friends with MacArthur, who did coach a minor league team, but they did not bring over like the Hall of Famers, and the tour was only like a week. It wasn't like a month or whatever. So.
All right. So there was no diplomacy of canine or otherwise Hall of Famers happening.
All right. And anything more on either of your stories that you want to add, Alan or Darren?
I mean, I could get more into comic book lore, but I think you've heard quite a bit
Spoilers.
today. What? No spoilers.
No spoilers. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean,
No
my story is
spoilers.
exactly
All right. And
exactly at face value. What I said, they had this one little crappy bridge. It crashed into the river, and nobody would give them a new bridge. So the guy calls Brezhnev and says,
That's amazing.
Help us."
That is a ballsy
That
move
is amazing.
for a town
That
person.
is amazing indeed. Well, that concludes our show for tonight. Thank you once again to our three historians. Thank you to Adam, our tech extraordinaire. And ladies and gentlemen, hope you enjoyed this episode. We are here weekly. I'm going to hand it back off to Adam to take us into the exit.
Let's do it. Thank you, Chris, for being our host. And we're here every week live. Please tune in. You can find us on Twitch and YouTube and where you get your podcasts.